Chapter 10: Love and the Courage to be Seen. Inspired by Erich Fromm and Carl Rogers. This conversation stands on the shoulders of two quiet revolutionaries of the psyche. Erich Fromm, the humanist philosopher-psychologist, wrote The Art of Loving, where he proposed that love is not a feeling we fall into, but a discipline we grow into, a practice of care, responsibility, respect, and knowledge. And Carl Rogers, father of humanistic therapy, built an entire approach on the conviction that every person blossoms where they are received with unconditional positive regard, with acceptance instead of judgment, empathy instead of analysis. Fromm taught us that love is an art. Rogers showed us that to love another, we must first learn to offer the same openness to ourselves. This chapter is an attempt to weave their voices together and to ask a simple but difficult question. How do we find the courage to be seen as we are and to see others as they are? The fear of visibility. Beneath much of our anxiety, there hides a simple longing to be seen and still be loved. From early life, we learned that visibility was conditional. A child dances, cries, expresses, and then meets approval or rejection. Little by little, we adapt. We create the persona, the curated self that seems acceptable, reliable, likable. Carl Rogers called this the conditions of worth, those silent contracts we sign to keep affection. If I'm successful, I'm worthy. If I'm calm, I'm lovable. If I'm pleasing, I'll belong. The result is a paradox. We crave intimacy yet fear exposure. We build relationships hoping to be known, then hide behind masks so no one truly knows us. To be seen without distortion feels dangerous because it dissolves control. Yet, as Rogers discovered through thousands of hours sitting with clients, when a person is understood deeply and accepted fully, something almost miraculous begins. The psyche reorganizes itself toward growth, like a flower opening toward light. Visibility, though frightening, is the condition for transformation. Love as a practice. Fromm dismantled the romantic myth that love simply happens. He wrote, "Love is the active concern for the life and growth of that which we love." Love, then, isn't found, it's cultivated. It is a discipline of attention. The parent wakes in the night once more for the child. Love as care. The friend keeps listening though tired. Love as responsibility. The partner chooses dialogue instead of distance. Love as work. Each gesture is practice, small acts through which affection evolves into commitment. In therapy, Rogers mirrored this same principle by modeling the three qualities every relationship requires. Congruence, honesty of presence. Empathy, feeling with not for the other. Unconditional positive regard, valuing the person beyond behavior. These conditions, when offered authentically, nurture both sides. They create emotional climates where learning, trust, and love can occur without coercion. The courage to be seen. To love is to risk rejection. There's no way to open the heart without opening the possibility of pain. But Rogers observed something profound. People fear rejection so much that they live half-lives of defensive relationships, connections where everyone performs rather than reveals. Real intimacy begins when we risk small exposures. Telling the truth we usually decorate. Showing emotion instead of commentary. Asking to be held instead of pretending we're fine. It's not naive courage but gentle bravery, the kind that quietly says, "This is me today, imperfect, uncertain, trying." Ironically, that vulnerability is what awakens affection. We connect through our cracks, not through our masks. Example: when defenses fall. Rogers once described a therapy session with a man who insisted he had no feelings. Rational, efficient, invulnerable. For weeks they talked about work, routines, theories, but one afternoon silence filled the room. The man stared at the floor and whispered, "I'm lonely." Rogers later recalled that a wave of tenderness entered the space. Everything changed. The mask cracked and the real person appeared. From then on, growth came naturally, not because technique changed, but because authenticity had entered the conversation. Being seen dissolved the isolation that knowledge alone could not. The different forms of love. Fromm distinguished several expressions of love, all requiring awareness more than emotion. Brotherly love, the sense of care for all living beings, a feeling of solidarity with humanity. Motherly love, nurturing without condition, accepting the other's existence as gift. Erotic love, the bold desire to merge yet remain whole, integrating body and soul. Self-love, not narcissism but respect for one's own being as part of creation. Love of God or of life, the ultimate openness to existence itself. Each form teaches the same movement, from isolation to union, without losing individuality. Love, for Fromm, was the answer to the problem of separation inherent in the human condition. Because we are self-aware, we experience ourselves as apart from nature and others, an exile consciousness. Love heals that exile not by erasing it, but by bridging difference through choice. The obstacles to love. If love is so natural, why is it so rare in its mature form? Fromm said it's because we focus on being loved rather than loving. We chase admiration, possession, compatibility, perfect chemistry, forgetting that love is an art, and every art demands discipline, patience, humility, and faith. He compared modern, romantic love to market exchange. I give affection, attention, and status in exchange for the same. True love begins when we reverse that equation, when we choose to give care because giving itself fulfills. To love someone is not merely to desire them, but to wish for their growth. Carl Rogers taught that genuine love for others rests on self-acceptance. You cannot offer unconditional regard externally while despising or denying yourself internally. Self-love here is not indulgence, it's honesty. It's looking into the mirror and saying, this person, with all their contradictions, is allowed to exist. When we meet our own vulnerability with warmth, relationships become freer. We no longer demand others to heal what we refuse to touch. A partner's misunderstanding no longer annihilates our worth. Criticism becomes information rather than humiliation. The more we know we are fundamentally okay, the more love moves from fear to generosity. The therapeutic parallel. Rogers observed that therapy is, in essence, love in practice, a microcosm of every healing relationship. When the therapist listens without judgment, reflects feelings accurately, and maintains unconditional regard, the client internalizes those attitudes. Over time, they become their own source of acceptance. Life outside therapy then becomes a series of new dialogues, with the inner critic with family patterns. With society, slowly, the self that once lived in defense starts to live in openness. That same shift can happen in ordinary love. Every time we respond to someone's fear with patience instead of distance, empathy instead of impatience, we generate tiny pockets of healing between us. Fromm insisted that mature love unites freedom and commitment. Love without freedom becomes possession. Freedom without love becomes emptiness. To truly love, we must desire the other's growth even when it leads them away from us. That's the supreme generosity, to support another, becoming without making it a threat to our own. This is why love is courage. It means letting people be who they are and remaining who we are without chains, without collapse. Example, the quiet partnership. Consider a couple who have been together for many years. Their affection no longer burns as sudden fire. It glows as steady warmth. Each week they share breakfast without many words. Outwardly nothing special, but within that ritual there is recognition. You exist. I am glad of it. That ordinary tenderness is mature love, the point where excitement turns into presence. Freedom remains, the option to leave, to reinvent, to differ, but they stay by choice, not pressure. Commitment chosen daily is freedom renewed daily. Both Fromm and Rogers saw love not as emotion, but as a particular way of seeing. When you love, you see beyond function, beyond roles, beyond masks. You perceive another soul unfolding before you and feel privileged to witness that unfolding. Love is the eye that says, "I recognize you're becoming." This perception becomes prayerful. It can happen between partners, friends, humans, and animals, even between artist and creation. Wherever attention meets reverence, love occurs. The eyes that see. We live in a world where we are looked at constantly, through screens, cameras, opinions, yet rarely seen. People see roles, behaviors, images, the parent, the colleague, the profile, the temperament. But beyond all that lives a quiet essence. Call it soul, call it psyche, call it being. Love, as perception, is the capacity to witness that essence without trying to reshape it. When Rogers sat with a client, he practiced this way of seeing. He listened not for diagnosis, but for the person beneath the patterns. He paid attention to tone, pauses, gestures, and resisted the urge to correct. That gaze of acceptance was like sunlight. It didn't pry, it simply warmed. And under that light, people grew. Seeing beyond behavior. Love as perception begins when we realize that behavior is only the outer shell of experience. The angry friend may be guarding pain. The withdrawn lover may be carrying shame. The controlling parent may be rooted in fear. When we look only at the surface, we react. To anger with anger, to withdrawal with withdrawal. But when we shift perception, when we look beneath behavior, we begin to understand. Understanding dissolves reactivity. It doesn't always fix circumstances, but it expands compassion. To perceive rightly is already to love. The quiet art of attention. Love as perception is not intense, it's subtle. It hides in small gestures. The pause before replying, the willingness to stay curious instead of certain, the silence that allows another to unfold. Rogers described it as an inner attitude of acceptance. That means the listener doesn't have to approve or agree. They simply allow the other to exist in their field of awareness without threat. Many people have never been listened to in that way, even once. When they finally are, they often cry, not because of hurt, but because at last they feel real. This is why loving perception heals. It mirrors existence itself, saying, "You are permitted to be." Example: the teacher. Imagine a quiet art teacher named Mara. Her students are adolescent, unpredictable, sometimes defiant. Rather than discipline through fear, she practices attentive presence. One day, a student tears a sketch and storms out, yelling, "I'm useless." Mara follows, but not with reprimand. She simply says, "You seem angry, maybe also disappointed." The student stops. Confusion softens the glare. "Yeah, I tried, it looked wrong." In that moment, correction would have broken something. Perception builds a bridge instead. Later, for the first time, the student finishes a painting. Love as perception doesn't rescue, it recognizes, and recognition awakens self-trust. To see someone clearly, we must learn to clean the lens through which we perceive. This lens is shaped by past wounds, expectations, fantasies. The more unconscious the lens, the more we project. We see not the other, but our imaginings. Jung described projection as a form of unlived love. We attribute to others the beauty or strength we've forgotten in ourselves. True perception requires continual humility, the willingness to say, "Maybe I'm not seeing everything." Love thrives on curiosity. It asks, "Who are you today?" rather than "Who are you always?" From evaluation to appreciation. Ordinary perception evaluates: good, bad, useful, threatening. Love as perception shifts from evaluation to appreciation. When we appreciate, we don't measure, we witness. The difference is profound. You can look at a sunset and grade its colors, or you can simply stand in awe. When you look at a person, their contradictions, messiness, becoming, with that same attitude of awe, love becomes a sacred attention, not an exchange. This doesn't mean losing discernment. It means adding reverence to discernment. Psychologically, being seen without judgment regulates the nervous system. Safety enters the body, muscles soften, breathing steadies. The healing look, that steady, accepting gaze, tells the other, you don't have to fight, flee, or perform. Every therapy session, every deep friendship, every genuine intimacy is filled with this look, sometimes wordless, always transformative. We underestimate how starved people are for kind eyes. Seeing and being seen. Fromm would say that love is not one-sided perception, but mutual awakening. When I see you clearly, I inevitably see more of myself. Your presence becomes a mirror that reflects my patience and my impatience, my generosity and my fear. Love is the meeting place where two perceptions clarify each other. But the order matters. To see others lovingly, I must first perceive myself with honesty. If my own gaze is cruel inward, it will never be gentle outward. Thus, self-compassion is the first act of loving sight. Example, the old photographer. There was an aging photographer who once said, "My job is to fall a little in love with whatever I photograph." He didn't mean romance, he meant attention. He explained that when people come to his studio, nervous and self-conscious, he starts a quiet conversation, watching for the moment their defenses drop. Then just as they exhale, he takes the photo. Years later, they look at that image and say, "That's the real me." This is the power of perception touched by love. It reveals truth without forcing it. Imagine being looked at that way and offering that gaze to someone else. The spiritual dimension of perception. At its depth, love as perception becomes a spiritual practice. Mystics of many traditions, Christian, Buddhist, Sufi, speak of seeing with the eye of the heart. They teach that when perception is purified of ego, everyone and everything shines with inherent worth. Psychologically, this is the movement from projection to presence. Spiritually, it is the movement from judgment to compassion. To love through perception is to see the divine in the ordinary, the sacred in someone's laugh, the light in their exhaustion, the humanity in their mistakes. It's the way a therapist holds space, or a parent watches a sleeping child, or friends sit quietly after a long conversation. To perceive lovingly also means to feel more. You will notice pain and beauty more acutely, empathy will deepen, boundaries will be tested. But perception sharpened by love brings wisdom. You start distinguishing what needs fixing from what only needs understanding. Some situations ask for change, others ask simply to be seen. The art lies in knowing the difference. And even when you must set distance, you can still perceive with compassion. That's the mature stage of love, empathy without attachment, clarity without indifference. Fromm concluded that love is the only sane answer to the problem of existence. Rogers discovered that being received with love is what allows a person to become who they truly are. Together they teach this. Love is not possession but presence, not perfection but understanding. To love is to say, "I see you, and I am willing to keep seeing you even when it's uncomfortable, because something in you calls to something in me." So tonight, as you finish this reflection, perhaps whisper inwardly, "May I have the courage to be seen. May I have the tenderness to truly see." And in that simple prayer lies the essence of psychology, of spirituality, of life itself. Two human beings daring to meet, with hearts unarmored yet unbroken,